You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, Saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another History of the Great War interview. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mikhail Krishnan, who has written a book recently on Milan Rastislav Stefanik, titled Milan Rastislav Stefanik, the Slovak national hero and co-founder of Czechoslovakia. Dr. Krishnan, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. So I don't think I'm making any bad assumptions by saying that the history of Slovakia during this time is probably not well known to 90+% of the people who listen to this podcast in English. So could you just give kind of a general introduction to the areas that would become Slovakia during this time, kind of before and during the First World War?
Yes, I think your assumption is right. That's also why I included in a short introduction to the Slovak history at the end of 19th century, at the beginning of 20th century, to my book. It's a short chapter, and in this chapter, or also during my speech, I am underlying the national point of view on Slovak history, simply because in the book I'm answering the question how someone became the national hero, in our case, the Slovak national hero. That's why it is important to understand also a little bit this Slovak history. So Slovaks lived in the Kingdom of Hungary, what was part of Habsburg monarchy, and Slovaks lived in so-called Upper Hungary or Slovakia. And, they lived there since 11th century, but with the rise of nationalism in 19th century, they started to formulate political demands. Even Slovak national movement was divided between Protestants and Catholics, and while Protestants thought that Slovaks were part of broader Czechoslovak nation, and they thought this under the influence of the theory of Slavic unity that said that all Slavic people are one nation, and this one nation have four branches: Yugoslav branch or Cyrillic branch, and Russian branch, Polish branch, and Czechoslovak or Czechoslavik branch. And also they had for this belief, they had their emotional reason, because they used one variant of one form of Czech language as their liturgical language. On the other hand, Catholics thought that Slovaks were an independent ethnic nation, and Catholics were in majority in Slovakia and still are. And these two movements, Protestant and Catholic one, were united by the codification of Slovak language in 1843 by one mythic figure of Slovak history. His name is Ľudovít Štúr, and so they started to cooperate closely. And of course, there was a revolution like everywhere in Europe in 1848-49. Slovaks formulated their political demands, but it was not very much successful. And another important date of Slovak history in this second half of 19th century is 1861, when Slovaks formulated their political demands in so-called Memorandum of the Slovak Nation in one small town in northern Slovakia. And I would say the most important demand was the autonomy for Slovak region, or something like, or they call it something like Slovak region. And this demand was the basis of all Slovak demands until the beginning of the Great War. Another important event was happened in 1867 with the Austro-Hungarian Compromise. Like until 1867, we talk about Habsburg monarchy, about Austria, but since then we are speaking about Austria-Hungary, and the monarchy was divided to the Hungarian part and to the Austrian part. And it is in this Hungarian part where Slovaks lived, the Hungarian government started politics of Magyarization, so-called Magyarization, that meant cultural and linguistic assimilation of non-Magyar nationalities, mainly Slovaks, Romanians, and Serbs. And in the time, there was only 50% of people, of inhabitants of Hungarian Kingdom were Magyars. I mean, ethnical Magyars. So this strongly limited the possibilities of Slovak politicians to maneuver, but of course they published their political periodicals, cultural associations that were founded, and so on and so forth. But from general point of view, I would say that at the beginning or at the end of 19th century, at the beginning of 20th century, Slovaks adopted 3 different strategies, like how to face this problematic situation, their problematic political situation. And the first strategy was so-called pro-Russian or pan-Slavic. So it was its main representatives were rather conservative Slovak politicians, and they saw Russia as the savior of all other Slavic nations, because Russia helped to establish Serbia or independent Bulgaria. But this was a rather naive vision, because Russians have their own interests, and they didn't really care about Slovaks. Another strategy was so-called Czechoslovak orientation. It was mainly by young liberal generation, so-called hlasisti, from the name of one periodical. Its name was Hlas, The Voice. And they said that Czechs and Slovaks were one ethnic nation, and so they should fight together to obtain some kind of autonomy. It was also advantageous for Czechs, because by joining Slovaks, their power position within Austria-Hungary would have been strengthened. And the third strategy was, I would say, pro-governmental. So when Slovaks abandoned their political demands and asked only for linguistic rights within Kingdom of Hungary. But to conclude this short introduction into Slovak history, I would say that all Slovak politicians or the whole Slovak elite was loyal to the monarchy, and they didn't ask for independence. They only asked for autonomy within the monarchy.
Thank you. So that's kind of an introduction to this area of history. So let's talk more specifically about Stefanik and where he kind of comes into this story before and then during the First World War.
Yes, Stefanik is a little bit in a particular situation, because he's seen as the Slovak national hero, as a Slovak national hero. He didn't live, or all his active life, he lived outside of Slovakia. So that's a little bit, as I said, particular. But he was born in Slovakia or Upper Hungary, in the family of a Protestant priest. Then he moved to study astronomy in Prague. When Stefanik was 24, in 1904, he left for France, where he wanted to work as astronomer. His great protector was Jules Janssen, a famous French astrophysician, who was the director of the Meudon Observatory. Meudon is a suburb of Paris. And Stefanik's main focus was to observe solar eclipses. He traveled to Spain, he traveled to Turkestan in Central Asia, and he climbed 6 times Mont Blanc in order to observe there some astronomical phenomenon. Because Jules Janssen constructed an observatory on the top of this highest European mountain. Like his job in Meudon Observatory was not a real job. It was rather some kind of internship, so he didn't really get paid for it. Then he worked 1 season as a deputy director of Mont Blanc Observatory Society. But then he took his own decision, his big decision, that he is going to build his own observatory either in North Africa, either in Tahiti. So then first he went to North Africa, but he didn't find the appropriate place for the construction of his observatory. And then he went to Tahiti, where, of course, it still is a very interesting, very beautiful island. But he also found their appropriate place for his observatory. But he understood very quickly that the range of activities of his observatory should be broader, because it was not easy to find money for financing of his observatory. So he wanted to build there a wireless telegraphy station or radio telegraphy station and join these 2 services with observatory and wireless telegraphy station. Then, he left. He built there this observatory, and that cost 250,000 francs. It was pretty expensive, mainly if we take into consideration that he left for France when he didn't have any financial resources, and he almost didn't speak any French. So then he went to island Wauau and to Brazil in order to observe the solar eclipses. But his most important mission before the Great War was to Ecuador, because, as I said already, he wanted to create wireless telegraphy station at Tahiti. But the problem was that France didn't have connection with its colonies. So he didn't want to limit only to this one station, but he wanted to create worldwide network of wireless telegraphy. So he went to Ecuador, and he wanted to build a station on the Galapagos archipelago in order to enable a connection between Martinique and Tahiti. I mean, this mission in Ecuador was very successful from the point of view of wireless telegraphy. It had a lot of dimensions, geopolitical, cultural, scientific, and so on. But then he came back to France, and he got the cross of Knight of Légion d'honneur, very high French decoration. I would like to say that since 1912 he was French citizen, and this mission in Ecuador happened in 1913. Then his last pre-war mission was to Morocco, where he wanted to create another station of his worldwide network of wireless telegraphy. So as we can see, this was someone who moved a lot all around the world. And he was someone who had a lot of personal interest in almost everything. So from all his journeys, he took to his he bring to his small apartment in Paris ethnographical objects, weapons, carpets, clothes, and so on and so on. And when people who visited his apartment in Paris, they said that it was not an apartment; it was rather a small museum. I mean, one of the most interesting thing that he found was Gauguin's woodcrafts in one remote island in French Polynesia, and where Paul Gauguin, the famous French artist, spent the last year of his life. He was also an artist. He took a lot of photographs all around the world. Thanks to them, we can see how it was traveling all around the world. He was an inventor. He had 2 patents in French Institute for Personal Property. Or I don't know exactly now how to translate it. And when the war broke up, he was as he was French citizen, he was drafted into infantry. But he was never satisfied with the common destiny or something like this. So through his wide networks among French politicians, he arranged that he was affected to French military aviation. And he was flying mainly on Western Front, and he wanted to benefit from his knowledge of astronomer, and so he established military weather forecast on one part of Western Front. This part of Western Front was under the command of General Foch, then who will later become Marshal Foch. And as we could see, I mean, in his project about this worldwide network of wireless telegraphy, he was never satisfied with local solution, so he wanted to create inter-allied military weather forecast. He founded military weather forecast in the Romanian army, and he was in touch with Russia's, Greeks, and Italians' military weather forecast. But then we don't know how this project of inter-allied military weather forecast ended, because Stefanik was more interested in other domains. And so, as we can see from what I said, it was someone who was very interesting. So when he came to those French and Italian saloons, he raised great interest immediately. A lot of women fell in love with him. He was seducer. He was romantical seducer. He was political seducer. He really liked the thing that women loved him, and he started to build his own legend already during his life. Besides that, he was a great storyteller, and for example, as I said already, he discovered Gauguin's woodcrafts, but he said that he personally met Paul Gauguin, a great French artist, who gave him those woodcrafts. But Paul Gauguin died in 1903, at the time when Stefanik was studying in Prague. Or another story that he was telling in French and Italian salons was that once he was charged to observe a solar eclipse in one remote island in French Polynesia, and when he came to this island, he called the chief of the local tribe, and he told him, "My friend, we have big problem. Tomorrow the sun is gonna disappear. But no worries. The French government is aware of that it should protect its citizens. So the French government sent me in order to make reappear the sun." And of course, as Stefanik was astronomer, he knew that the next day the solar eclipse will took place at, let's say, 2:00 afternoon, and that really happened. And this chief of local tribe was amazed by this magician who was able to control sun, and who was able to make that the sun reappear, or first disappear and then reappear. But Stefanik was telling this kind of stories in French, among French and Italian high society, but everybody understood that he was exaggerating. But in the same time, everybody understood that behind this exaggeration, it was a lot of experience, that he really went to this island to observe the solar eclipse. Everybody understood that this exaggeration was just part of his strategy, how to convince people and to get them on his side. The last reason, or that I will mention here, how Štefanik impressed people, that he became, from simple soldier, he became general within 3.5 years. And it was not for military reason, because although he fought on Western Front and then a little bit on Italian front, but it was mainly for diplomatical reasons, because he was fighting for this Czechoslovak cause. And this Czechoslovak cause was very convenient for France. So French Ministry of Foreign Affairs were constantly asking the Ministry of War to promote Štefanik in higher ranks, and he ended up as general in summer 1918.
The one truth about human history is that change is inevitable. But the one thing that has never changed is that humans need food to survive. There are many ways to get that food, but one of the easiest ones is Factor. Factor delivers ready-to-eat meals right to your door. All you have to do is heat them up and dig in. In 2 minutes, you can be eating tasty keto or vegan options, or any of their 35 options that they have available every week. So you can choose maybe the cheesy garden herb chicken, maybe the Santa Fe green chili beef skillet, or perhaps the Caribbean spiced tofu. It is all delicious, and if you have a bit of a sweet tooth, Factor still has you covered with a wide range of snack and smoothie options. Chocolate mocha cheesecake, snickerdoodle macaroons. Any of that sound good? And don't worry, even the tasty stuff is dietitian approved. Head over to factormeals.com/GW50 and use code GW50 to get 50% off. That's code GW50 at factormeals.com/GW50 to get 50% off.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can in the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
That sounds like quite a life to live, moving all over the world and doing all those amazing things. So let's move forward a little bit. So the one thing you didn't talk a lot about until the very end there was Slovakia and how Štefanik kind of relates to the foundation of Czechoslovakia. So how does he get involved with that, and what role does he play after the war?
Okay. Yes, that's a very important matter. So let's start with this. Well, of course, at the beginning of the war, I mean, no one imagined, or among Entente's politicians and diplomats, no one imagined the dissolution of Austria-Hungary. It was a state that existed for a very long time. It had its special role within this concert of powers, or concert of great powers in Europe, and for balance of power. So it was, and when this Czechoslovak foreign movement came with this idea of dismantling Austro-Hungary, it was very radical. It was a very radical project. As I said already, in Austria-Hungary, there were Slovaks and Czechs lived. No one asked for an independence. Everybody asked for an autonomy. So, and they had to come with some ideological support. It was this idea of self-determination of people, and they wanted to destroy or dismember Austria-Hungary and create so-called New Europe. Of course, for the Czechoslovak foreign movement, the main aim was the establishment of Czechoslovakia. But in the same time, they understood that the main enemy of Entente was Germany. So they were arguing that Austria-Hungary just became a German tool for its expansion towards east, and Austria-Hungary should be replaced by the chain of states that will make a barrier for this German expansion towards east. And this chain of states was, of course, in North Poland, then in the middle Czechoslovakia, then Romania, and South Yugoslavia. So at the head of this Czechoslovak foreign movement that was led by its leading body, Czechoslovak National Council, and with its president, Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk, future first president of Czechoslovakia, its vice president, Milan Rastislav Štefánik. There was another vice president, Josef Dürich, but it's a little bit complicated. Then he was they decided to exclude him from this Czechoslovak National Council, and the general secretary of this Czechoslovak National Council, Edvard Beneš, the second president of Czechoslovakia. So, and of course, they started great propaganda work because, of course, no one knew at the time what was Czechoslovakia. No one knew, or very few people in West understood geopolitical, or the internal situation of Austria-Hungary. But they quickly understood that this propaganda work is very important, but they needed something more concrete. So they decided to create Czechoslovak army abroad, so-called Czechoslovak legions. And they wanted to base them in France because, of course, in France there was Western Front, and it was the center of the whole world. Everybody was looking at the Western Front. It was also important from propaganda point of view. And the problem was that in France there were no prisoners of war of Czech and Slovak origin, or there was not a big Czech and Slovak colony living there. So, and those were because this Czechoslovak army abroad was recruited mainly, or they recruited the volunteers for this army mainly among prisoners of war, POW of Czech and Slovak origin, and among Czech and Slovak colonies abroad. So Štefánik, as he traveled before the war, he continued to travel also during the war. He went to Serbia, and to Italy, to Russia, Romania, then back to Russia, to the United States, Italy, and back to France, Japan, and Russia again. So we can see that he moved a lot, and from the most of those countries, he sent to France those Czechoslovak volunteers. For example, when mainly in the United States, there was around 1.5 million of Czechs and Slovaks. So he went there and he recruited there, or he organized the committee that recruited the volunteers. And thanks to the presidential decree in December 1917, the creation of Czechoslovak legions was allowed, and around 10,000 Czechoslovak soldiers fought at Western Front in the summer 1918. The situation was a little bit more complicated in Italy because Italy had the same territorial demands on Adriatic coast as Yugoslav movement, and so from general point of view, Rome saw with great mistrust the so-called movement of oppressed nationalities of Austria-Hungary. It means Czechoslovak movement, Yugoslav movement, Polish movement, and Romanian movement. That's why Štefánik's position in this country was very complicated. When he came there to negotiate with the Italian government in February 1918, first he just wanted to transfer those volunteers from Italy to France because they wanted to create Czechoslovak legions mainly in France. But then after very difficult negotiation, he got a green light to establish Czechoslovak legions in Italy. It was, we should say that it was a great success because, for example, Polish and Romanian legions were allowed to be established in Italy only in August 1918, so just 2 or 3 months before the end of the war, while Stefanik achieved it in April. Of course, it was also great success from propaganda point of view. He arranged handing over of the military battle flag for Czechoslovak legions on 24 May 1918. It was exactly the third anniversary of the entry of Italy into the Great War. And in summer 1918, around 20,000 Czechoslovak soldiers fought on Italian front, and the most important battle was battle on Dos Alto. I mean, this was one of the biggest tradition of Czechoslovak army in interwar period. And when situation in Italy was complicated, the situation in Russia was even more complicated, because there was of course there was a Czech minority living there who organized a special first special military unit, Česká družina, Czech unit, and then it slowly changed to brigade. But the Russian government didn't want to allow massive recruitment among prisoners of war. But this changed after the Battle of Zborov in summer 1917, where this Czechoslovak brigade had great success during Brusilov offensive. This Czechoslovak legions in Russia started to grow. There was by the end of 1918 was around 40,000 of them. But the problem was that Bolshevik came to power after Bolshevik Revolution, and they wanted to sign a peace with Central Powers. So what happened? Later? The very famous Brest-Litovsk peace, and the tensions between Czechoslovak legions and Bolsheviks started to grow, and Czechoslovak legions were the strongest military power in Russia. And we are more or less in summer 1918, and all those military success in France, in Italy, and mainly in Russia, because Entente didn't have enough soldiers, or didn't have enough tool how to influence internal situation in Russia. So thanks to those Czechoslovak legions, Czechoslovak National Council started to be recognized by military by Entente, or by the great power of Entente. Czechoslovakia became reality on 28 October 1918. So, and that's when Stefanik came to Russia, already as a Czechoslovak Minister of War. When he left Europe, it was in August 1918. The war was still raging in Europe. But when he came to Siberia, to Russia, the war was already over. So when those Czechoslovak soldiers, they didn't understand, why should we fight here against some Bolsheviks? We want to go home because the war is over, Czechoslovakia was created, and so on. The matters became even more complicated with the coup d'etat of Alexander Kolchak, and the Russian hero of the Great War, because Kolchak was officially ally of Entente, but Kolchak was a very conservative, pro-monarchical politician, while Czechoslovak soldiers were more left-wing oriented. So when Stefanik argued that if we want appropriate frontiers for Czechoslovakia, we should fight in line with Entente foreign politics, and he was explaining to the soldiers that at the Paris Peace Conference, their fights are closely observed by all politicians. So that's how they can influence also the future of Czechoslovakia. So at the beginning, he convinced them to continue the fight, but after he visited all the units, or not all, but some of the units on the front, he understood that the withdrawal of the Czechoslovak legions was necessary, and so he ordered the withdrawal or he ordered the retreat, and he left for Europe. When he came to Europe, there was another great problem in Czechoslovakia, where were two military missions, one French military mission, another Italian military mission, and those two missions were competing for influence in Czechoslovakia. Štěpánik was French citizen, but in the same time, his fiancée was Italian Marquise Giuliana Benzoni. He had great contacts and great friends among Italian political elite. So he was a little bit in complicated situation, but he arranged the compromise between those two missions, between French and Italian government. That was something that no other Czechoslovak politician was able to do. But he died soon after, on 4 May 1919, while returning to his so-called liberated homeland in an airplane crash near today's Bratislava.
It's kind of unfortunate that happened at that time. Like, he kind of achieved this big goal and was not able to enjoy it at all.
Yes, but maybe I will argue that it was also a blessing, because because, for example, his death was tragic. His death was romantic because he died when he was 38, and it was seen as his ultimate sacrifice for his nation, and so he wanted to come home by plane because it was in order to impress his Slovaks. So this romantic nature, I think, plays an important role. For example, also there was the circumstances of his death were not enough investigated at the time. So until now, there is a lot of conspiracy theories going on how Štěpánik died, and that's why he's still discussed in Slovak public space, and he's symbolically present in Slovak political or also general discourse. And also, I think his premature death, thanks to his premature death, his legacy could be claimed by different political parties, because as he died in 1918, he was not involved in very often very radical political controversies in interwar Czechoslovakia. That's thanks to this lack of his political standpoints or knowledge of his lack of knowledge about his political standpoints. He became something like plastic hero, and all political parties could claim his legacy except for communists. But until now, if you take Slovak liberals and Slovak far right politicians, all of them are claiming Štěpánik's legacy.
So so his death, while tragic, also kind of set him up in this position, being untarnished by any political actions after the nation was founded.
Definitely, I think so.
You talk a little bit about how his legacy has continued on in various ways. So could you just elaborate more kind of on what his legacy is within Slovakia?
Yes, I think it's a very interesting question, because since interwar period, as he was one of the founding father of Czechoslovakia, there was a massive construction of his cult. There was his statues were built all around Slovakia. Books were published about him. The streets bear his names. his memorial was constructed, and so on. So in interwar period, that's understandable. He was presented as a hero, as a Czechoslovak hero. But there was still this kind of Slovak question, as we had Slovak question within Kingdom of Hungary, we had Slovak question within Czechoslovakia, because one part of Slovak population wanted autonomy within Czechoslovakia. In another part of Slovak population wanted so-called centralized Czechoslovak states. And in the same time, by the first part of Slovak population, Štefanik was presented as Slovak, as the most important Slovak, and by the second part of this Slovak population, but also by Czechs, he was presented as Czechoslovak, in order to give to the citizens of Czechoslovakia the idol that they should identify with. And during the World War II, Slovakia became independent, or it became rather German satellite, and of course Štefanik was presented as a Slovak hero, because this Slovak Republic had to negatively identify towards its Czechoslovak past. And some politicians said that if Štefanik lived, he became Slovak Hitler. But that was just a misusing of his legacy. Only communists tried to destroy his legacy. I mean, his statues were erased. He was not mentioned in textbooks. The names that bore his name were renamed. And from general point of view, communists criticized everything that was linked to so-called bourgeois Czechoslovak Republic, interwar Czechoslovak Republic. What's more, Štefanik was involved in anti-Bolshevik fight of Czechoslovak legions in Russian Civil War. It was, of course, something that they could not pardon him. And from general point of view, he was presented as cosmopolite and as French imperialist agent. There was short period of political detente in so-called Prague Spring or Czechoslovak Spring in 1968, where people could speak a little bit more freely about Štefanik. But from general point of view, communists tried to destroy his cult, his memory. But I think it only strengthened his popularity, because he got an aura of hero who was denounced by unpopular political regime. And so after the fall of communism in 1989, he retook his prominent place in so-called Slovak Pantheon. The statues that were erased were re-erected. The names were renamed. So now in every Slovak town you have Štefanik Street. A lot of books were published about him, and as after the end of communism, the discussions again about whether Slovaks should become independent or whether they should continue to be part of Czechoslovakia emerged. Those two images of Štefanik, the Slovak and Czechoslovak, re-emerged, and of course they were used in order to support that political project. Now today he is often presented as European or cosmopolite, but this time it's something that is seen as popular, as positive. And of course, because of the entry of the Slovakia into European Union, this part of his identity it's very interesting. And I think that Štefanik, or the use and misuse of Štefanik's legacy reflects the challenges of the creation of Slovak identity that had always mainly during the 20th century struggle to find whether Slovaks want to create their own nation and be independent nation, or stay together with Czechs. And this last last remark, when in 1919 there was a public poll about who is the greatest personality of Slovak history. Štefánik won by far because he got the half of all votes from personalities that were placed in top 10. So that's of course we can discuss about it for a long time why it was like this, but it still shows that he is very popular in Slovakia.
So I often ask people this question of like, what prompted you to write this book? Like, what was kind of basically, why did you write this book about this person?
Yeah, that's a great idea, and there is a funny story behind it. When I was studying I think I was in fourth grade in Europe, we had, or in Slovakia, we had a little bit different system from American one. So I was already studying history and French language, and my professor came and asked me, "Oh, Michal, there is an opportunity to go to study Štefánik to Paris. Would you be interested?" And to Sorbonne. I said, "Oh, of course, if someone is offering you to go to study Sorbonne, you will not refuse it." But then I learned how it happened, because there was one Slovak professor, specialist on Slovak theater, who was a visiting professor in France, and he was teasing his colleagues at the Department of Contemporary Central European History, because the professor of this department, Professor Marès, he was writing the biography of Beneš. His assistant, Mr. Subigu, he was writing the biography of Masaryk, and he was teasing them. If people know Czechs and Slovaks, we are teasing each other all the time, and it's like Canadians and Americans. And he was asking them, "But come on, man, you are writing biography of Beneš, you are writing biography of Masaryk, but Štefánik was French citizen, and you should write a biography of Štefánik." And he told them, "Okay, so if you want someone to write Štefánik's biography, you should send someone from Slovakia." And it happened to be me by accident, because during my studies I wanted to focus more on medieval period, but it was just like this, and I was, when there is an interesting opportunity, I never say no. So I continued, and I wrote my PhD dissertation on Štefánik, and then it was published in French, in Slovak, and in English.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about your book and about Štefánik in general. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Great, thank you, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to being here, and it was really great, great experience. And so just a small reminder, and the book name is Milan Rastislav Štefánik, the Slovak national hero and co-founder of Czechoslovakia. It was published by Routledge in 2021, so last year.
And for those listening, I've put a link to the book in the show notes that you can check out.